Hey guys, Lonewolf here, and today I just want to give my opinions on player statistics. Whether or not I think they matter, to what degree they matter, which ones you should potentially focus on, whether or not it's possible to compare one player with another. I'm going to give my thoughts on all of this and talk about some of the popular misconceptions as well. Now, there are plenty of people who will say that statistics don't matter, that you shouldn't care about them. And I kind of see where they're coming from, but I don't really agree, and I certainly don't agree with people who think that only bad players don't care about statistics. I think the reason people actually don't care about statistics is because they're so used to the popular interpretation of them, that kill-death ratio is everything, kill-death ratio makes you a good player, for example. And that is clearly wrong. They've recognized this, and then they've said, okay, well, statistics just don't matter in this conventional way. And they're right about that. What they're not right about is that statistics don't mean anything, because they do. Reading your stats can give you an impression of how good a player you are in certain areas. It can show you where your strengths and weaknesses are, and it can potentially show you where you might want to focus some attention and improve. And I think this is kind of where integrating these sort of metrics into games came from in the first place. It's become about comparing different players and trying to quantify how good one player is against another, and I don't think that's particularly productive or particularly helpful. It's all fairly arbitrary anyway. But you could potentially get an idea of in what areas one player is going to excel against another, and also how they're going to play overall. So I'm going to focus mostly on the statistics that I like to monitor to make myself a better player, the things I'll keep an eye on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis to see if I'm improving, see where I should be making changes, how exactly you go about making changes to one statistic over another without compromising on anything, or if you do compromise, for an overall net gain. I'll also talk briefly on where I think it's appropriate to make assumptions about the meaning of another person's statistics and where it's not. So the first thing that people often focus on is your kill-death ratio. Now, I think DICE have got the right idea by not making that the most prominent stat, by giving that second place to things like your skill and your rank, because kill-death ratio is probably the easiest thing to manipulate, and it's also the one that's probably manipulated the most often. Let me give you an example. If you sit at the back of the map with a sniper's rifle and you get 6 kills throughout the entire game, and maybe 1 death when somebody counter-snipes you, and you do that consistently, then you have a KD of 6-1, and yet you aren't doing really anything for your team. I know some people will argue that getting sniper kills at range is valuable. If you get enough kills with the sniper rifle, then it might be, but 6 kills one way or the other, it's not going to make a big difference. If, however, you get the same KD by ground pounding, being on those objectives, you've probably seen me do this in a couple of videos where I'm taking an assault rifle and I'm going to assault objectives and I get a KD of 6-1 because I got 60 kills and 10 deaths, then in that case it would be fair enough to say that I played well, at least in that game. And if I was able to maintain that every single round, then that would actually make me a much better player than the sniper who gets 6 kills to 1 death. So obviously kill-death ratio, there's a whole load of ways you can manipulate it, but it's not an accurate measure. You can camp in a corner and get a good KD without actually being very useful. You can also see players with lower kill-death ratios than would be expected for somebody of their stature. If they are very objective orientated, or perhaps they're often playing with very good players and they just want to get on the flag to burn it for a little bit, and they're okay with the fact that they may die without killing anyone, so long as it lets their squad take that flag, then that person is clearly a very valuable player. They know what they're doing. They might actually be very good in a gunfight, but they're going to put themselves in positions where they know they won't survive just to win the game. And that person will have a disproportionately low kill-death ratio, but it doesn't make them a bad player. So kill-death ratio is both easily manipulated and can show an inverse relationship with positive changes you make to your team contribution. So I really don't like it, and on top of that, it's not even particularly accurate to how you play at the moment. Now, what I mean by this is that kill-death ratio is an average of how well you've played across your entire playtime. So for me, for example, if you look at the battle reports I've got for, say, the last month, my KD on the ground when I'm playing with infantry averages out around 3.5 to 4. But if you look at my KD on battle log, it's shown as 2.62. And this is a reflection of the fact that I wasn't always as good as I am now. So kill-death ratio is not a good measure. I don't like to look at it for myself or for other players. Both score per minute and kill per minute suffer from a lot of the same issues that kill-death ratio does, in that they're a measure of your history as well as your current performance level, and they're also quite easy to manipulate. You can get a higher score per minute or kill per minute depending upon the game modes you play, so it's never a good idea to gauge somebody else's performance against your own based on this, unless of course they play the same game mode, and even then I would do this with caution. Kill per minute is a bit like kill death ratio. It puts a bit too much emphasis on just killing lots of people. If you put it together with KD, you can kind of come to a conclusion that somebody's getting lots of kills and actually in the thick of it because their KD is high and so is their kill per minute. But it's a pretty difficult one to actually come to an accurate conclusion about. Score per minute, however, I do quite like. Score per minute shows your net contribution, not just the number of kills you get. It doesn't place quite such an emphasis on that. So I do like the fact that it takes into account things like capturing flags, repairing vehicles, giving out ammunition, destroying enemy vehicles. All these tasks reward you with points. And so I feel like score per minute is a little bit more relevant, but again, it takes a while to update if you start playing better, so it's difficult to monitor it and say that I'm getting better. It's also difficult to say that somebody is better or worse than you, or better or worse than somebody else based upon score per minute because of the difference in game modes and the difference in playstyles. So whilst I like to see mine trending up, it's not something I worry unduly about. So I will occasionally scroll back through my history and just check that my SPM is trending upwards. You can actually make changes to this value quite easily without really hurting your team contribution. Unlike KD, where if you want to really increase it dramatically, you're going to have to adopt some tactics that might be a little bit self-serving. With SPM, you can actually do this just by making sure you're on objectives and you're getting your kills there instead of elsewhere. So a lot of flanking, a lot of objective play is really going to help you out. It's also a fairly good indicator overall of the fact that you're improving. So I like to do this either on Battlelog, or you could use bf4stats.com, that's pretty good as well. Now unfortunately, in my view, one of the easiest ways to boost your stats without really even hurting your team is just to pick the vehicles more often, especially if you don't do this already. I think you'll find that particularly with land vehicles, you're able to help your team capture objectives and at the same time are more capable when it comes to farming kills. So your stats will go up across the board, hasn't really hurt your team. And to me, I think this is one of the biggest tip-offs that the infantry to vehicle balance in this game isn't quite right, especially with vehicles like the mobile anti-aircraft where people can sit at a distance and with really very little skill just farm lots of kills. I just don't feel like this is quite the way it should be. I know there's an initiative in CTE that's working on this, but I haven't heard much back from that for months now, so I'm not overly optimistic. And I guess in fairness, it does depend upon what you think the vehicle balance should be like. There are people who think, well, hey, I should be able to get a 50 kill streak, especially if somebody's repairing my tank. Not a problem. And I can kind of get that, but at the same time, in my view, playing as infantry should be a different style of play, not an intrinsically inferior one, which is what it is at the moment. It's really the reason I was against the SRAW nerf, that at the moment the SRAW stands as an excellent leveler between the individual pilot and the individual infantry. One skilled infantryman can at the moment take down a helicopter quite reliably if they are skilled enough, in much the same way that a skilled pilot can take down infantry very reliably if they're skilled enough. And I think this is an excellent bit of interplay, but there do seem to be plenty of people out there who think that getting in a vehicle entitles them to a huge pool of kills, and anything that's seeking to make the balance of power shift away from that is somehow perverting the natural order, perhaps because in real life a helicopter is an incredibly strong vehicle asset, or so is a tank as well. And they really don't want this to happen, but in my view, I don't feel like it should be quite as easy as it is to turn a vehicle into this god tier power up. But do let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm quite interested to see where people lie on this one. Now, total kills and total score and time played, they're all really a gauge of experience more than anything else. They also reflect the type of game modes you play as well. But total time played, I guess it tells you something about yourself if you're looking at your own, but if you're looking at other people's, it just tells you they have a certain amount of experience. And this leads on to rank, because rank, unlike total time played, is accessible to you in-game. You can see this for everyone on the scoreboard, and it is essentially just the combination of your time played multiplied by your score per minute. Now, this is in theory, because in reality DICE have frozen the max rank at first 110, then 120, 130, and now 140, which has allowed players like me to rack up more hours without actually being able to increase your rank. So you can't really use it as a gauge of how good the player is, but it does show you they've been playing for longer, which I think generally leads to better players for two reasons. The first is if you play for longer, you've obviously got more experience, more time to hone your skills and pick up better game sense. And also, there is a reality that if you've played for a longer period of time, chances are you're enjoying the game. And from my experience, I would say that people who enjoy the game enough to keep going until level 140 tend to be the better players. The worst players tend to stop wanting to play. So generally speaking, higher skilled players will have higher ranks, or rather that higher ranked players will have higher skill, because you can get high skilled players at lower ranks as well. Now, there are certain statistics that may not tell you how good a player is, but will tell you what sort of a playstyle they like to adopt. And for some people, they're going to be quite versatile. If they've got a nice distribution of service styles across all the kits and a nice distribution of kills with weapons versus vehicles, then this sort of a player, you may be able to glean something from that, but mostly it's just going to be for interest's sake. The reason I look at this is because there are a lot of players out there that lack versatility, are very strong in one area, but are absolutely crippled if they're forced not to play on their territory. So these are the people who like to sit in tanks, or the anti-aircraft, or just the jet, or just the helicopter, and if you can cripple their ability to do that, they have to fight on your terms, and they're going to be pretty impotent. I can't tell you how many times I've come across people who, when we've been able to successfully counter them as a team, have been forced to play on the ground, and have just completely failed at it. And that's really what you want to do. So if you can find out ahead of time that somebody loves playing in the main battle tank but is just useless as infantry, then you can instruct your team to lay mines all over the place. It's going to make their progress extremely slow. If there's lots of rooftops, you can tell your team to make sure they've got C4, drop it on top of them. You can also have a load of people playing as engineer. All you need to do is just type it into the chat and say, hey, one of these guys is going to sit in that tank all the time. Make sure you lay mines everywhere. As soon as he dies, he then has to either wait for his vehicle, which a lot of them will do, and that makes them completely useless, or they're going to spawn in as infantry and just be pretty ineffective compared with those of you who've practiced as infantry, and make sure to be versatile. So there's two more lessons to this really. The first is have a look at people's statistics, especially those high rank players, and see how they got there, see if they're versatile or see if they're very particular on how they like to play. And the second thing is make sure you yourselves are versatile players, because if you come across somebody and a team that knows how to counter your particular skill, you're going to be absolutely crippled and pretty useless on the battlefield. So make sure you have a nice diverse skill set. Plenty of people will advocate using your win-loss ratio as an indication of how good an objective player somebody is. I've found this to be kind of useless though, because it seems to be more a reflection of how often somebody plays in an organised squad, or how often they switch to a winning team a lot of the time. So even for me, because I play with the squad most of the time and I almost always win games with them, but not so much on my own, it's not really very accurate, so I'd recommend you stay clear of this one. Don't pay too much attention to win-loss ratio. I wish it was more useful than it is, but unfortunately it just doesn't seem to be. Now when it comes to your accuracy stat, I quite like this one. Plenty of people put a lot of emphasis on this, and I'd say it's somewhere in the middle in terms of its usefulness. Good players tend to have an accuracy around 20 to 23% with their main assault rifles, carbines. I like to try and keep mine around about there if I can. Don't worry too much though if your overall accuracy is low, because this is affected by playing in jets or helicopters and using the miniguns on those, or using the rib boat miniguns. That can lower it a lot and actually won't make you any worse of a player. Likewise, don't worry if your accuracy with light machine guns is a bit lower. That's to be expected because you've got more bullets to spare and you should just be suppressing people even if you can't hit them. So the accuracy stat can be quite useful, but just take the overall one with a pinch of salt. Now, the one number that I have left till last, because I think it's probably the one I focus on the most and the one I like using the most, is that overall skill number in the middle of your battle profile with a little bar underneath it. I really like this because it's quite easy to affect. You can affect it quite quickly, so it's a reflection on how well you're doing at the moment rather than how well you did in the past. And I like the way that works. And I've also found that although occasionally it is a bit skewed by the fact that, for example, if you play against a really good team, it's going to go down, and that's not really your fault. For the most part, when I play better, my skill goes up. I'm not sure exactly what the algorithm is on this. I'm sure you could Google it and find an answer to this. I personally don't care. All I know is that when it goes up, I tend to have done better, so I focus on this one. Personally, I like to keep it over 500. When it goes under 500, I've either had a pretty bad night or I've just not been playing well. I've been playing against really tough teams. When it's over 500, I'm pretty happy, and when it reaches nearly the 600 mark, that means I'm really on top of my game. This will vary from person to person, but that's just my take on it. I really like the skill score. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I want to say on player statistics. I do think they have the potential to make you a better player if you're watching out for those little weaknesses in your playstyle that might emerge after a change or over time, just so you can correct them, perhaps revert a change that wasn't overall a good thing. Also to check out those top threats on the enemy team, just see how they play, see if you can find a weakness. Any little bit of extra information may well make the difference. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, whether you think I've been going on about something that couldn't possibly matter less, or if you think I haven't paid enough attention to a stat that does matter. Do let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.